The scent of antiseptic and old books mingled in the quiet air of Thorne Veterinary Care, a clinic that had seen better decades, but still stood as a testament to Dr. Arthur Thorne's enduring dedication. Dr. Thorne, a man whose silver-streaked hair and the gentle lines around his eyes spoke of countless nights spent worrying over his patients, meticulously checked the chart of a perfectly healthy, albeit slightly overweight, Persian cat. Its owner, a flustered woman in an expensive suit, tapped her foot impatiently. "Are we quite done, Doctor? Fluffy has her spa appointment." Dr. Arthur offered a small, tired smile. "Fluffy is in excellent health, Mrs. Gable, perhaps a little less of the gourmet salmon treats." He spoke with a quiet authority, his voice a low rumble that usually soothed anxious animals and their owners alike. Mrs. Gable, however, merely huffed, already gathering her designer pet carrier. As she swept out, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume, Dr. Arthur sighed, the sound barely audible in the sudden stillness. He walked over to the window, gazing out at the bustling city street, yet his eyes seemed to focus on something far beyond the concrete and cars. The clinic, usually a place of healing and quiet comfort, felt more like a gilded cage today, his expertise a routine, his interactions often transactional, leaving a familiar ache of solitude in their wake. He adjusted his spectacles, a familiar gesture when lost in thought, a subtle weight settling on his shoulders, the echo of a life lived with purpose, yet now tinged with an unspoken loneliness. He turned back to his immaculate desk, a single, slightly worn photograph tucked into the corner, a younger him, a bright smile, and a woman whose face was now just a soft memory. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished linoleum floor of the examination room. As Dr. Thorne meticulously cleaned his instruments, each scalpel, each clamp was dried and returned to its designated spot, with practiced, almost ritualistic precision. His movements were economical, born of decades spent in these rooms. The silence of the clinic was broken only by the hum of the refrigerator storing vaccines and the distant rumble of city traffic. He glanced at the appointment book. The rest of the afternoon was clear. Such quiet periods had become more frequent in recent years, as newer, flashier clinics opened in more affluent parts of the city. Dr. Thorne prepared a simple lunch for himself in the small staff kitchenette, a sandwich and a cup of black tea, brewed strong. He ate standing by the counter, looking out the back window at a small, struggling rosebush he'd planted years ago, a splash of defiant color against the drab alley wall. It was a solitary meal, as most of his meals were. His longtime nurse, Martha, had retired 5 years prior, and while he'd had temporary assistants, none had stayed. The clinic had become an extension of himself, competent, well-maintained, but undeniably quiet. He thought, not for the first time, how much of a life was measured in these small routines, the steady rhythm of days that, while dedicated to healing, often felt indistinguishable one from the next. He finished his tea, rinsed the mug and returned to the front desk, the worn photograph catching his eye again. He traced the edge of the frame with a finger, a fleeting expression, almost too quick to name, crossing his features before he straightened up, ready for whatever the remainder of the day might bring or not bring. The gentle chime of the bell above the clinic door, usually a mundane sound, broke the afternoon's quiet with an unexpected urgency. Dr. Thorne looked up from a veterinary journal he'd been idly flipping through. Standing hesitantly in the doorway was a small girl, no older than 8 or 9. Her clothes, though clean, were visibly mended in several places, and her worn sneakers had seen many miles. She clutched a lumpy bundle wrapped in a faded, threadbare towel to her chest, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Her dark eyes, wide and luminous, were filled with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. "Excuse me, Mr. Doctor," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She took a tentative step inside, the scent of rain and damp wool clinging to her. It's Patches. He's not breathing right." Dr. Thorne rose slowly from his chair, his gaze softening as he took in the child's anxious face and the desperate way she held the bundle. "Come in, child. Let's have a look at Patches." He gestured towards the examination room. The girl, whose name he would later learn was Maya, hurried forward, her small hand protectively covering the towel. I don't have much money, sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly, a flush rising on her cheeks. "Mama gave me what she had, but it's not a lot. But Patches, he's my best friend. He's really sick." Her lip quivered, but she blinked back tears, her gaze pleading. The raw, unfiltered love in her eyes for the unseen animal in her arms was a stark contrast to the casual entitlement he'd witnessed earlier that day. In the sterile quiet of the examination room, Maya gently placed the towel-wrapped bundle on the cool metal table. With trembling fingers, she slowly unwrapped the layers, revealing a small, scruffy calico cat. The cat was alarmingly still, its breathing shallow and ragged. Its fur, a patchwork of orange, black, and white, was dull, and one of its eyes was crusted shut. Dr. Thorne's professional demeanor took over, his years of experience kicking in as he reached for his stethoscope. "All right, let's see here, Patches," he murmured, his voice calm and reassuring, more for the girl's benefit than the nearly unresponsive cat. He carefully listened to the cat's chest, his brow furrowing slightly. "His breathing is indeed very labored. Any idea what might have happened, Maya?" Maya shook her head, tears welling up again. He was fine this morning, then he just got sleepy, and he wouldn't eat. He always eats." She stroked the cat's head with a small, hesitant finger. "He's a good boy, Doctor. He just needs help." Dr. Thorne continued his examination, gently palpating the cat's abdomen, checking its temperature. He was focused, his mind running through a list of potential ailments. Then, as he was about to ask another question, Maya whispered almost to herself, "Please, Patches, be okay, please." The name Patches, spoken aloud by the child, seemed to hang in the air. Dr. Thorne paused, his hand hovering over the cat. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face, a momentary stillness that Maya, in her distress, didn't notice. He straightened slightly, his gaze distant for a heartbeat, as if the name had unlocked a door to a long-forgotten room in his memory. The worn photograph on his desk, the smiling woman, a calico cat, remarkably similar to the one on his table, had often been in her arms. A cat she had affectionately and uniquely called Patches. He cleared his throat, the sound a little rougher than usual. "Patches," he repeated softly, looking down at the small, suffering creature. "An interesting name." Dr. Thorne's mind, usually a fortress of clinical detachment, was suddenly awash with images. A sun-dappled garden, laughter echoing, and Eleanor, his late wife, cradling a calico kitten with markings almost identical to the one lying before him. "Let's call him Patches," she had said, her eyes sparkling with affection, "because he's a perfect little patchwork of joy." It had been their first pet together, a creature of boundless energy and comfort during the early, sometimes lean years of their marriage and his burgeoning veterinary practice. That Patches had lived a long, happy life, passing peacefully in Eleanor's arms many years ago, just before her own illness had begun its slow, inexorable march. The name, unused and unspoken in his presence for decades, now felt like a physical blow. He quickly masked his internal turmoil, his professional training a deeply ingrained shield. "He seems to have a severe respiratory infection, Maya," Dr. Thorne explained, his voice regaining its steady, calm tone, though perhaps a shade gentler than before. "And he's quite dehydrated. We'll need to run some tests to be sure, but I suspect pneumonia." He carefully avoided looking directly at Maya for a moment, busying himself with preparing a syringe. The coincidence was too sharp, too precise. He had seen thousands of cats, hundreds of calicos, but none that had stirred this particular poignant memory so vividly just by a name. "Pneumonia," Maya whispered, her eyes growing even wider. Is that very bad?" Dr. Thorne met her gaze then, seeing not just a worried child, but a reflection of the same deep love Eleanor had held for their Patches. "It can be, especially for a little one like him. But we'll do everything we can." He focused on the immediate task, the familiar procedures a lifeline in the sudden emotional current. Yet as he worked, the image of Eleanor's smile and the feel of their Patches purring under his hand intertwined with the sight of Maya's small, anxious face, blurring the lines between past and present, between professional duty and a deeply personal ache he thought he had long since buried. If you believe that a small act of compassion can change the world, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future stories. Dr. Thorne administered subcutaneous fluids to combat the dehydration and a broad-spectrum antibiotic. Patches remained listless, but his breathing seemed to ease ever so slightly with the supportive care. Maya watched every move with rapt attention, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap. She didn't flinch at the sight of the needle, only at the cat's weak, almost inaudible mewl. "He'll need to stay here for a few days, Maya," Dr. Thorne said gently, after he had settled Patches into a warm recovery cage with an oxygen tube nearby. "He needs continuous monitoring, more fluids, and possibly stronger medications depending on how he responds." He explained the procedures in simple terms, focusing on the care and support Patches would receive. "We need to help his body fight this infection, like giving a little soldier the best weapons to win a battle." Maya nodded, her expression solemn. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled handful of coins and a single folded dollar bill. She carefully smoothed out the bill and placed it, along with the coins, on the counter. "This is all I have, Doctor. Mama said to give it to you. Is it enough for the weapons?" Dr. Thorne looked at the meager offering, then at Maya's earnest, hopeful face. The sum wouldn't cover even a fraction of the cost of the initial examination, let alone several days of intensive care and medication. His clinic, while not opulent, had overheads, bills to pay. He usually required a deposit for extensive treatments. Yet, looking at Maya, her devotion to Patches so palpable it filled the small room, the usual financial considerations felt crass, almost cruel. The memory of Eleanor and her boundless empathy for all creatures, great and small, resonated strongly. "Don't you worry about that right now, Maya," Dr. Thorne said, his voice softer than he intended. He pushed the money gently back towards her. "The most important thing is getting Patches well. We can talk about the rest later." He saw the relief flood her face, quickly followed by a shadow of concern. "But Mama said I have to pay. We always pay our way." "Doctor," Thorne managed a reassuring smile. "And you will. Right now your job is to go home, get some rest, and send all your good wishes to Patches. He'll need them. You can visit him tomorrow." He knew the costs would mount, a significant obstacle for a family clearly struggling, but for now the only thing that mattered was the little calico cat fighting for its life, and the little girl whose world revolved around him. The resilience of animals, he often thought, was a mirror to the quiet strength found in humans, especially in children like Maya. What's the biggest lesson your pet has ever taught you? Tell us in the comments below. Over the next 24 hours, Patches' condition worsened despite the antibiotics and oxygen. His breathing became more distressed, and a worrying rasp developed in his lungs. Dr. Thorne, after a sleepless night spent checking on the small calico, knew a difficult decision had to be made. X-rays revealed a significant fluid buildup and a possible abscess in the lung, something antibiotics alone wouldn't resolve. Surgery was the only viable option, a risky procedure on such a small, weakened animal. When Maya arrived the next afternoon, her face etched with worry, Dr. Thorne sat her down. "Maya," he began gently, "Patches is a very sick little cat. The medicine is helping a bit, but there's something more serious going on in his chest. To give him the best chance, I need to perform an operation to help him breathe better and clear out the bad stuff." He explained it as simply as he could, likening it to carefully cleaning out a blocked pipe so water could flow freely again. Tears streamed down Maya's face, but she listened intently. Will it hurt him?" she choked out. "He'll be asleep, Maya. He won't feel a thing during the operation, and I'll be very, very careful. I've done this many times." He omitted the part about the inherent risks, the slim chances for a cat in Patches' condition. "But it's his best hope." Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Okay, doctor, please save him." Her trust was absolute, a heavy weight on Dr. Thorne's shoulders. Later that day, under the bright lights of the operating room, Dr. Thorne worked with meticulous care. The procedure was delicate, requiring all his skill and concentration. As he carefully navigated the tiny chest cavity, the name Patches echoed in his mind, not as a distraction, but as a strange undercurrent, a thread connecting this tiny life to a profound personal loss. He found the abscess, larger than he'd feared, and skillfully drained it. The surgery was long and tense. When it was finally over, and Patches was breathing a little more easily, though still critically ill, Dr. Thorne felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. As he cleaned up, a question nagged at him, a question that had been forming since Maya first uttered the name. Where had a little girl from the poorer side of town, a girl who likely found her cat as a stray, heard the name Patches? It wasn't a common name for a cat, not really, and certainly not for one with these specific calico markings. It was a detail too specific, too resonant with his own past to be a simple coincidence. The following morning, Patches was weak but stable. His breathing was less labored, and he'd even taken a few tentative licks of watered-down kitten formula. Dr. Thorne felt a cautious optimism. Maya arrived early, her face pale but hopeful. She sat by Patches's cage, whispering soft words of encouragement to the recovering cat. While Maya was preoccupied, Dr. Thorne found himself tidying the small pile of Patches's belongings, the threadbare towel he'd arrived in. As he folded it, something small and hard clinked. Tucked into a frayed seam was a tiny, tarnished metal disc, clearly once part of a collar. It was so old and worn that any engraving was almost entirely illegible. Curious, and driven by the persistent, nagging question about the cat's name, Dr. Thorne took the tag to his desk and, using a magnifying glass and a soft cloth, began to gently clean it. Slowly, painstakingly, faint etchings began to emerge from beneath years of grime. First a phone number, a local prefix but with an older 7-digit sequence he hadn't seen in years. Then below it, a single, beautifully scripted letter, E. And finally, almost invisible to the naked eye, the name Patches. Dr. Thorne's breath caught in his throat. E. Eleanor. His Eleanor. The phone number, he vaguely recalled, was their old number, from the little house they'd lived in when they first got their Patches. The script of the E was undeniably hers. She had always prided herself on her elegant handwriting. He stared at the tag, his mind reeling. It couldn't be. Their Patches had died years ago. This had to be a different cat, a different tag. But the combination of the name, the calico markings so strikingly similar, and now this tag with Eleanor's initial and their old number, it was too much. His hand trembled as he held the small piece of metal. It felt like holding a ghost. Could this be a descendant, or was there another, even more improbable explanation? The quiet solitude of his clinic suddenly felt charged, the air thick with unspoken possibilities and the weight of a past he thought was long settled. He looked over at Maya, still cooing softly to the recovering cat, oblivious to the storm of emotion and memory her small, sick friend had unleashed within him. With the tag clutched in his hand, Dr. Thorne approached Maya. "Maya," he began, his voice laced with an emotion he couldn't quite conceal, "where did you find Patches, and how did he get his name?" Maya looked up, her brow furrowed by his serious tone. "He was a stray, Doctor. He showed up at our apartment building a few months ago, real skinny. Mama said we couldn't keep him at first, but he kept coming back. He had this old dirty piece of string around his neck with this little metal thing on it." She pointed to the tag in Dr. Thorne's hand. "It was hard to read, but I could just make out Patches. So that's what I called him. It seemed like his name already." Dr. Thorne felt a wave of dizziness. A stray with Eleanor's tag. It defied logic. He gently probed further. "And the string, Maya? Do you remember anything else about it? Or where he might have come from before your building?" Maya thought for a moment. The string was really old, and he seemed to know the neighborhood near the old park, the one with the big oak tree by the river. Sometimes he'd wander off towards there. The old park. The big oak tree. That was where he and Eleanor used to walk their Patches. After their cat passed, Eleanor, in her grief, had taken his old collar and tag and buried them beneath that very oak tree, a small private memorial. She'd told him it was so a piece of Patches would always be in their special place. Could a stray cat years later have somehow unearthed it? And could that stray, by some incredible twist of fate, be a descendant drawn to the same area? The odds were astronomical, yet the evidence in his hand, the child's innocent testimony, and the uncanny resemblance of the cat all pointed to a connection that transcended mere coincidence. Over the next few days, as Patches slowly but surely recovered under Dr. Thorne's diligent care, something shifted within the old veterinarian. The clinic no longer felt like a gilded cage. Maya's daily visits, her unbridled joy at every small improvement Patches made, a purr, a playful bat at a string, filled the quiet rooms with a warmth that had been absent for too long. He found himself looking forward to her arrival, to her chatter about school and her dreams. He even started bringing in treats for Maya, not just for Patches. The photograph of Eleanor on his desk seemed to smile a little brighter. He hadn't realized how deeply the solitude had settled into his bones, until this small girl and her miraculously named cat had begun to chip away at it. The act of saving this Patches felt like mending a piece of his own broken past. A second chance not just for the cat but for him. If the story of Patches also touched your heart, Leave a comment below telling us about your four-legged companion. We'd love to read it. The day Patches was finally well enough to go home, Maya arrived with her mother, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, clutching a small envelope. "Dr. Thorne," she began, her voice hesitant but firm, "we can't thank you enough. Maya has told me everything you've done. We've gathered what we can. It's not much, but we'll pay the rest, I promise, a little each week. Doctor." Thorne looked at the envelope, then at Maya, who was beaming as she gently stroked Patches, now purring contentedly in her arms, a new simple collar around his neck, a gift from the doctor. He then looked at the old tarnished tag he still kept on his desk. He picked it up. "Mrs. Rodriguez," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "There's no bill." He held up the tag. "This cat, this Patches, he has a connection to my late wife, Eleanor. This tag belonged to a cat we loved very much, also named Patches. Finding it again with this little fellow after all these years, it's a gift. Consider any costs covered by an old friend." Tears welled in Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes. "Doctor, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let me visit Patches sometimes," Dr. Thorne said, a genuine smile spreading across his face, a smile that reached his eyes and eased the old lines of loneliness. "And perhaps Maya could help me out around the clinic on Saturdays. An official assistant for Patches' checkups." Maya's face lit up like the morning sun. "Really, doctor? Can I?" "I'd like that very much," Dr. Thorne replied, his gaze soft. As Maya and her mother left with a healthy, purring Patches, the clinic felt different. It was still quiet, but it was a comfortable quiet now, filled with the echo of Maya's laughter and the promise of future visits. "Doctor." Thorne walked to the window, no longer seeing a bustling, indifferent city, but a place of unexpected connections. He picked up the photograph of Eleanor. He still missed her terribly, but the sharp ache of loss was now accompanied by a gentle warmth, a sense of peace. This new Patches and the innocent love of a child had not replaced what he had lost, but had shown him that his heart still had room to grow, to connect, to heal. He realized that true wealth wasn't in the fees he collected, but in the lives he touched, both animal and human. The little rosebush in the alley, he noticed, had a new bud about to bloom. How about sharing this video with that friend who loves animals as much as we do? Let's spread this chain of good. Weeks turned into months. Patches thrived under Maya's devoted care, growing into a healthy, playful cat. Every Saturday, Maya would arrive at Thorne Veterinary Care, not just for Patches' checkups, but to assist Dr. Thorne. She diligently wiped down counters, talk to the animals in the recovery cages, and listen with wide-eyed fascination as Dr. Thorne explained simple procedures or shared stories from his long career. He taught her how to gently handle nervous patients, how to listen for a healthy heartbeat. In turn, Maya brought a youthful energy and an infectious enthusiasm that permeated the old clinic, chasing away the last vestiges of its former somberness. Dr. Thorne found himself looking forward to Saturdays with an eagerness he hadn't felt in years. He started keeping a small jar of cookies on his desk, ostensibly for clients, but everyone knew they were for Maya. He even found himself humming sometimes as he worked. The clinic, once a symbol of his solitary routine, had become a place of shared purpose and quiet joy. He still had his moments of melancholy, of missing Eleanor, but they were no longer overwhelming. The connection he'd forged with Maya, and through her, with this new Patches, had shown him that life, much like the resilient animals he cared for, had an incredible capacity for healing and for offering second chances, not just for survival, but for happiness. The true richness he now understood more profoundly than ever wasn't found in avoiding pain or loss, but in opening one's heart to the unexpected connections that could mend it. And sometimes those connections came in the most unassuming packages: a scruffy calico cat and a little girl with an unwavering love, bringing a message of hope from a cherished past into a brighter future.